people talk about plotting like it's boring, but it's like it's because you're plotting in a boring way. It's you're not giving yourself the space to invent it, right?
Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Ihsan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 171 of the podcast. And it is November 20th, 2024, as we record this. Today, we're talking about planning out your book, the
Mm.
process of doing that. So that's going to be fun. And we have lots to talk about. I want to thank a new patron, Elizabeth
Yay.
Amber from Anchorage, Alaska. Yay, I'm so happy.
Ooh.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Elizabeth. We want to thank all of our existing patrons as well for believing in our work offline and here on the podcast. You can go to patreon.com/Valerie Ihsan, IHSAN, and patreon.com/Strange Air Stories. All the goodies are listed out there. Um, let's see. Announcements, author updates. I I'm still going strong in my head
I love it.
on the Embody project for the patrons. And I think about doing what's happening is I am not doing the almost daily um, video updates. I haven't kind of settled into a routine of that. And so when I think about doing them, I'm like driving home from work or so I need to set aside time to create that content. I was hoping that I could just spontaneously do it, and I still think that's possible. I just need my whole plan of doing it was to have the accountability of checking in and not having this just be, I want to get fit and healthy in the back of my head and not actually do the things. So I want the accountability and I
Right.
also want the practice of creating short videos behind the paywall, so that I can get comfortable doing it so that I can then use that tool as, like for social media.
Yep.
Not the content itself. I still think that will be private and behind the just for the patrons. But I mean, just the idea of getting used to creating short videos. And
But we're in like parallel mind because this is like 2025 for me. It's like, yeah, yeah. Like I am so uncomfortable making video content because it feels just sort of silly. But also, if you look at the engagement on video versus the engagement on other
right,
stuff, it's like
it's
you have
time.
to be silly. You need to be.
And usually I don't feel silly doing it. I just
Oh, I feel so silly.
it's I embrace silliness. It's the fear of rejection that I have issue with, which is silly because I mean no one's going to reject me
No,
as a as a person
human.
because I put up a 45-minute Instagram reel on, I don't know
45
what.
minute Instagram reel. I don't think
Oh, no,
anybody.
45 second.
Oh, you
Did I
said
say
45
minute?
minutes. I thought they will reject that. That's pretty long. That's called
Even
broadcast television, Val. That's called NBC or something
that's why
like
we have
that.
a podcast.
Right. Yeah. This is long
uh,
form. No,
yeah.
it's hard. I feel silly. For me, I feel like even if I was delivering instructions that would save people from a tsunami, like, even if I was reading that to the beach community that is the world, like I
Mhm.
would still feel like a silly person. Like I'm like, I don't know. I think it's because of my age, right? I'm in my late 40s. We came from an era when media was polished and refined, and it was
Yeah.
like if somebody was on the news, the TV, they had makeup and they were holding.
Hmm.
Nowadays, it's like, man, you don't need any of that.
Yeah, and I loved what Anne was saying on our when we talked with Anne Abel when she
Yeah,
said the thing that went viral was her video on showing her apartment. Just
right,
like a quick, here's what my apartment looks like. And that went
right.
viral. Like, okay, so this means you don't have to be polished. You could just really say
Oh, or
whatever.
those videos where people hold the books up to the camera, the page side, and they'll talk about the book before revealing what the book is. Like those things go all over the world and crazy. People go crazy for them, and it's like it's a person holding up a book.
So I've discovered I'm not an early adopter, and I'm mostly okay with that. Sometimes I have some FOMO and I'm like, oh, I should have been on the bandwagon a long time ago. But I'm usually okay with everyone else sorting out the kinks and then I'll go in and do the thing. But I have not yet approached TikTok, and I'm just now wondering in 2024, almost 2025, maybe should I? I don't know.
Well, if
So
Congress bans it, you won't have any up. You won't even get to. So,
if Congress bans it, okay.
well, there was
So,
talk of banning TikTok because it's run by. This is not a political podcast. This is not a political podcast.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, but it works. That's the thing. It works. I just read some story about a guy who sold 700,000 copies of his self-published novel because he had a viral TikTok something, and it was like 700,000 copies of a book. It works. It's where the people are.
Well, more on that to come, I'm sure.
More on that to come. Let's take it
I
baby
have,
steps, right, Val? We're just gonna
yeah,
go like
baby
let's just you
steps.
and I get comfortable in front of a camera,
Right, and then we'll do the thing. So, one last
then we'll do the
announcement
thing.
for me. I am teaching a class in Eugene, Oregon all day long, Saturday, December 7th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's called Unlocking the Heart of Your Memoir. And we're going to spend all day long just talking about your memoir project, memoir myths, doing writing exercises, character development exercises. It's going to be a lot of fun. I really enjoy myself when I work with word crafters, and the folks that sign up for those classes are all just really wonderful human beings. So go to wordcrafters.org and you will find the class there. I'll put a direct link in the show notes. But yeah, that's coming up soon. Sign up quick.
I like that you said you enjoy yourself. I think that makes a uh I think that makes a really good class is when the
Hmm.
person is teaching it is enjoying themselves.
Hmm.
I think that really I think that matters. So,
I liked your newsletter where you had all the pictures from Ghost Story Weekend, and
mhm.
that was great newsletter. I read
Thank
every
you.
bit of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a great experience, and I really hope to be back. I've gotten the feedback from the participants, and everybody seemed to have a great time. Like it's hard for me to accept praise, but like I got a
Mhm.
bunch, and so I like it took me a while to heap it on myself, and then I just did. So yeah, it's a positive thing, and I think it's yeah. If you, whether it's that retreat or another, like it's valuable to just find a time to get into your space and, out of your space that demands your attention and into your own creative head and go for it. I think a lot of people miss that. My author
I
update. What am I doing? What am I
I
doing?
just remembered one thing that I wanted to say for author
Oh yeah.
update. I because I'm going into the holiday season, I'm going to be working a whole ton of hours at the bookstore, which diminishes my time, working on my business. And that always kind of sends me into a frantic, oh my God. And it's only temporary, at the bookstore. And I at the beginning of the year tell myself, you're not going to do a lot of business work during December because you're going to be working retail, that's going to take up all your bandwidth. But every end of the year, I get frantic about not having enough time to work on my business. So I think in order to counteract that, I want to
Hmm.
do another time audit. Have you done one of these lately? I haven't done one for
If I
years.
did one right now, I'd probably like have to check into the same asylum that Jack Nicholson went to and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because I haven't had any real mastery of my time for about since really August. It's been a lot of like it's good because it's I'm using a different muscle, the
Hmm.
like I can flex and adapt, but I'm really really looking forward to settling into something and then being able to audit time and yeah. I do. I do it a lot. but
Do
I
you do it? I
would not
haven't done
do
it
it
for
now.
years, so I'm gonna print out a copy of my weekly spread in the like a blank one from my planner because it goes in little half-hour increments. So I'm gonna start at the morning, like morning routine and go all the way to getting ready for bed. And I want to like just every half hour write down what I'm doing because I have a feeling that I am not utilizing my time appropriately.
Yeah, I have that feeling too about me. That's why it's scary.
So I'm hoping to do that this week as well. All right,
Good.
so back to your author update. Sorry to like
Oh,
abscond with part of your.
no, 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 no. I don't. I'm writing. I mean, I've had three or four new stories that I've been tinkering with. We'll talk about this in the main meat of the podcast, right?
Hmm.
I'm kind of there's many ways I plan a novel, and one of the ways I've discovered in the last 3 months is like not be able to put a story down. So I'm not really planning a book. I'm just sort of writing something. Um, but this is the like I've said, the end of the year is about finishing energy. I've got a lot of things that I've started that I'm just trying to tie up, trying to get some stories done, trying to get some client work done. Um, one of those is easier than the other because I guess clients are busy with the holidays too, and they're not
Hmm.
delivering what they need to deliver. So you know what I've done, like author update is like I've let go. When my client does not make that meeting and that pushes their timeline, that pushes their timeline. And
Hmm.
I'm no longer like feeling like I'm chained to their like I have a client that's having a child, like it's his wife is went into labor 3 weeks early. Yep. I
Pause
mean,
on the project.
right. Pause. We worked together for years, and I used to panic when those timelines would get blown up. But like,
Hmm.
you know what? Time panic. I'm not going to panic. It's like we will get the screenplay done. It's just it won't be by
The original
Thanksgiving.
deadline because you blew up the
Yeah.
timeline.
Yeah. Way to go have the baby early, girl. Which is great. He's a great guy. I'm so happy for him. But also, I feel like yeah, this is just a lesson. So yeah, I'm finishing some short stories, some novel things that have been hanging out. I really want to hit kind of my birthday is in January. It's the end of January, and I kind of treat my birthday like New Year's.
Mm,
Um, I kind of make my New Year's resolution on my birthday and kind of do it that way. So I'm really gearing up for my birthday present to myself is having a clean slate on a lot of
mm,
unfinished things
hmm.
and looking and I am actively reinventing like what my Patreon's going to look like, how I'm going to go about doing things much differently than I've done. I too am not an early adopter, but I have not given up on the idea of being an optimizer.
Hmm.
Like the first people in on Patreon, I have some Patreon accounts that I follow, 10,000 subscribers, 15,000 subscribers. Great. That's for the early adopters. I didn't get there, but I can optimize what I do and make it viable. And yeah, I don't know. I think the race is like trying to win the race is just not going to happen, but trying to, hit your pace is possible.
Hmm.
So
And find your pace,
find your pace.
find
Yeah.
your lane.
Yeah. Find your lane, be in it. You see this business is so full of like, here's how I got to $10,000 in sales within 3 months. And here's the frantic formula that I did. It's like, I don't know. Is that really what you want to do? Like panic and like I don't know. I'm a little more pragmatic at this point. So I'm leaning into that. I know my rhythm. I feel like I've got, and yeah, it's finishing energy for the rest of the year, guys. I'll have some stories and we'll talk about them in the meet too, how they fit in. So
All right, awesome. What are you reading?
I just finished hats off to Becky from Ghost Story Weekend who recommended they're those silly Stranger Things novels. They're kind of the prequel stories for all the characters. And at the table on Sunday morning, she was going on about how wow this was like the Flight of the Icarus was just a great book and like it's so great. And I was like, this can't be that good. I checked it out from the library. It was that good. It was so entertaining. So
Flight
I
of
was
the
just
what?
Flight of Icarus. I don't know if there's the in there, but it was just, it's fan service. It's like, Netflix trying to optimize their characters and into publishing and, trying to monetize the fan base. And so I have like a bit of you know, a stink eye toward that kind of stuff because it feels like a money grab, but book was good. I mean, the book had Stephen King vibes, so I liked it a lot.
Did you say it was a Stranger Things book?
Yeah, so there's
Okay.
seven, I think seven Stranger Things books, and they're all prequel stories involving the characters, like how
Oh,
they
okay. Mm-hmm.
find their way into the Hellfire Club and how they find their way into the group. And you know, I'm a sucker for an origin story. I'm a sucker for backstory, as writer group Gary would tell you, like too much backstory. Um, so yeah, it's good
Have you made
stuff.
him the t-shirt yet?
No, but I feel like that's another 2025 thing. Like all my t-shirt ideas, even if they're just for me, I'm gonna print
Merch. Yeah.
them. Gotta have, and people love random. So I think you could probably find a market for just t-shirts that say writers group Gary says. I am now picking up, though. I've always wanted to read October Country by Ray Bradbury. I have been picking at it because it's been on my bedside table since October. It
hmm
hasn't really felt like October until the last couple of days, like weeks around here. Like the leaves
hmm
haven't really been falling.
hmm
But now with the rain and the bluster and the storm, so I'm going to
hmm
read Ray Bradbury's October Country. What do you
Nice.
got?
I just finished reading The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. Um, Fast-paced mystery thriller. And so I'm going to go back to the nonfiction Happy Pocket Full of Money, which I had to pause on. This is really like when my world gets kind of frantic, I need more fiction than non because I don't
Yeah,
have the bandwidth to like learn about a new thing but I still crave learning, so I always have a nonfiction title, circulating in the reading time.
right.
And that is a book club book. And I think we're meeting like December 11th for it. So I've got a couple more weeks. So I do want to finish that. But yeah, I have so many books to choose from in terms of fiction. So I don't know what my next fiction will be, but
Mm.
I will I will swim around in a happy pocket full of money and the year of the puppy until I land on a novel that I want to read. And we're going to my dad's next weekend. Not next weekend, but Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we'll be at my dad's in Albany. So I will bring a novel for that for sure. Because there'll be points where we just need to tune out from each other.
Yeah. Well, I got The Year of the Puppy from the library the other day. So
Did
I'm
you?
kind of, yeah, I have a puppy. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to know what's going on here.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. It's just for some reason I can't ever read through her books. We talked about that before. So,
Yeah.
okay. Um, any
I got a
resources,
tip. I
tidbits?
got a tip. I got a
Yeah.
tip. Everybody knows Jane Friedman's newsletter. I
Mm-hmm.
think you and I know it. I don't know if we've ever talked about it in here.
Mm-mm.
I feel like it's one of those things that's been around for so long that it's hard to like how something is around so long, it's like it almost becomes irrelevant. It's so reliable, it almost becomes irrelevant. Like you don't even look at it anymore. Like it's not the new thing. But her hot
Mm-hmm.
sheet, I started reading it like last week. I've read it a couple times. The hot sheet by Jane Friedman is amazing information. If you don't subscribe to it, if you don't follow her, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's craft, it's business, it's resources, it's from one of the only truly reliable, connected and ethical people in the business.
She really has the pulse of the industry too. She just really
She's
knows
amazing.
everything that's going on.
She is amazing. And again, like it's not clicky, it's not trendy, it's not clickbaity, it's about just fundamental. And so I think that's why that's why it kind of, you can lose track of it because she's not trying with it, she's just doing. And
Mm-hmm.
but to her credit, it's an amazing resource. And if you're not at least looking at it occasionally, you really should.
Cool. Right. Awesome. Well, we should get into the meat of the episode. We're going to be
Yeah.
talking about planning your book. So, what is the first thing that you, Eric, where do you get your ideas from? That's usually the first thing people think of when they think of writing a book or planning out a book, is starting with the idea. Like I always start with a character, just the idea of a character. This character usually shows up for me, and they show up in a kind of a not a mysterious way, but in a way where I'm immediately like, "Ooh, what's your story?" Like, why did you come over here? What do you got to tell me? And then kind of learning about the character, and that sparks the curiosity, and then that triggers the creativity. And yeah, and then I start following and learning about the character first and then seeing what her problem is. That's where I start. What about you?
I like that you said her problem. I think that was good right there. You made that character a
I
female.
do write POV male, but for some
I know.
reason
I'm just saying.
she just popped out.
I just like how you didn't default to like you had a her there. I like that. Same. I don't want to say same like and just leave it at that, but it's pretty much the same thing. I think I'm always attracted to the similar archetypes in the world that I encounter. Um, it's usually when for example, we were leaving the beach this weekend and we were a little late getting out of the house. The cleaning lady shows up and she had to wait 10 minutes. And I sat there waiting to get the dogs in the car, just kind of thinking about what's her story. You know, she's sitting there looking at her phone. She's got like baby shoes hanging from the rearview mirror. It's like she's got a story. That character, that type of character always intrigues me. Like, and for me, I was thinking about this very topic with her at that moment. Like, because I was with my friends, they always ask me to explain how I write and where my ideas come from. I think it's that there's that archetype that I'm attracted to. The guy at the bar that is keeping to himself, the person on the bus. Like it's eventually that archetype that I'm attracted to does something different than they've done before, and
Hmm.
that's my in. Or they relate to something different than before and then that's my in. Like, oh, here's why I've been interested in you, archetype, because you could do this. Yeah, always a character, a familiar character that gets into an unfamiliar situation.
So I actually think about theme story hypothesis pretty early on when I'm coming up with story ideas because I don't know if this is like a low self-worth default, but my next after the character shows up, I'm like, who's going to care about this? Like, what is this about? Like, why should anyone read this? So I want to know like what that takeaway message is going to be. Like, what is the story really about? And so I spend some time thinking about that. Is that one of those things that you think about during the writing process, or is that one that you just discover as you write, or even after you're all done? Some people don't even know what the theme is until they're done writing the rough draft.
I don't think in theme so much, I guess. When you say it, and I think I've had this thought while talking to you before, and that is like you identify theme early. You definitely seem to gravitate toward either needing the theme, wanting the theme. I think for me, I try to answer the question, why this character, why now? Like why is this character entering the story, my fictional stream right now? And when I can answer that question in an interesting way that I don't expect, then that's when I think like if it's new and fresh to me, then I
Hmm.
can make this new and fresh to someone else.
I think maybe the reason why I think it does actually have to do with that like imposter syndrome, self-worth stuff. Like, why would anyone want to read this? I think it does is triggered from that. But also the just lost my thought. What did you just say about why now? Yeah, oh, just keeping your interest in the story because you're going to be with this person and this story for like over a year probably between edits and revisions and, writing the whole thing. Like, so it has to hold my interest for that long. And
Yeah.
and I think that's daunting for a lot of writers, like, oh, it's got to be a good story because I got to be interested in it for a really long time. And I think that actually stalls me out a little bit when I'm coming up with stories.
Hmm. I yeah, I don't know. I to sort of pivot that thought an alternative direction. I don't want to say different, but an alternative direction. I think that it's the element of I think it's the element of surprise that consistently makes it interesting to me. I actually started writing a story about this ridiculous person that's sitting and waiting for for my family to leave the beach house. And I could not like what's the typical story to me? Like, oh, she goes in to clean the house and she finds something she's not doesn't expect and it changes her world. That's the baseline of every story, right? A typical person in a non-typical situation who responds in a surprising way. That's the basis of kind of everything. Um, but as I was writing out the story idea, kind of in odd moments, um, it kept surprising me. Like I kept what she did, and what I found her doing in my thought process kept surprising me, and it kept challenging me to surprise her with something new that I was, as she's playing the role, kind of the role of the in the improv exercise. She like I'm kind of feeding her things, and she keeps responding interesting. It keeps giving me energy to feed her new situations. And I got
Hmm.
to the end of a story, and I thought like a story idea, and thought, wow, that's I have always really been intrigued by that character. I did not expect our relationship to go the way it did. But I could write it. I mean, it's a short story, but like, so I think that continuous element of surprise is what fuels me. When I hit that thing where it's like, well, of course that character would do that, then I think the energy dies. Like when
Mm.
I hit the like, oh, that's a very typical thing for her to do or him to do, then I'm like,
So
huh.
that's cool. Like, so, and my takeaway from that message, I'm always searching for theme,
I
is
love that about you. I wasn't being critical. I really like that about you.
I was making fun of myself.
I
Um,
know.
is the, I mean, I can use this sort of as a metaphor for my own writing too. Like, so, so being able to be open to the surprise, like, don't, if I come up with an idea and my immediate thought was, well, why would that be interesting for 2 years, Or
Right.
instead of starting with the negative, I could just challenge myself to be open to the surprise and know that, I'm not married to the idea. If in 6 months it's no longer interesting and I can't revive it, that's really not wasted time. We're just practicing our craft.
Right. Right.
So having my goal be just being open to the surprise of the story, I think will make me more engaged in creating stories. I
Right.
like capturing those ideas, following
Yeah.
that curiosity.
And I don't, what I caught myself saying, and I needs to be clarified, I think, is that like not every story can like razzle dazzle be one surprise after another. Characters need to do typical things like, eat, sleep, pull off on the side of the road, get gas in the car. Like there things need to happen. Like normal behavior needs to engage in your story. And so I'm not saying like every moment has to be razzle dazzle,
Hmm.
but the moments that make up the story are what should surprise you. And I think
Hmm.
if you ever, for me, and I see it a lot in, I don't know, kind of hurried self-published fiction, like especially I see it a lot when I read romance stuff where it's like it's just a new it tends to be a lot of like it's like one surprising element around a bunch of trope that is played for trope. And that's like I think that can tire you out as a writer if you're just exercising the tropes in a typical way. Challenge yourself to keep that's what keeps that story going. And what keeps you like edits can be kind of a fight. You're fighting to keep things in the story that you love. Well, the more surprising and exciting those things are, the more likely you are to keep them in the story versus like, you know, toss them out. I see that a lot with editing clients who are like, I just don't know what to keep and what to let go. And I think it's because they just like a lot of that stuff hasn't really like thrilled them when they
Mm-hmm.
were writing it. They were connecting the dots in an
Mm-hmm.
uninspired way.
Mm-hmm.
So when
So,
you talk about planning a book, it's like, I fully plot a book out in my head or in notes. Like I wrote 7 or 8 pages of notes for a short story, but like that is a string of unexpected, like it's stringing together pantsed moments that like really puts the book together.
oh,
Like,
so you just kind of marinated in your head, thinking up these unsuspecting plot points, and then you sit down and write, you connect those instead
I think
of
what ha
create. How do you I like plotting and planning, but I
love
also
it.
like leaving room for detours and surprises because I think that's meaty and creative and juicy and, interesting. But I like to have the container first. And so that does require me to come up with like, what's the conflict? What's the flaw in the character? That's usually the next thing too. Like, okay, what's your problem?
Right,
What is it that's holding you back that you don't know about? That's what I ask the character next, usually.
right,
And
right,
then I know how the story will have to end is with that death of the flaw.
right.
And then
Or
I
the death
have
of the character
the
because
then
they
I
can't let
have
the flaw
the
go.
what?
I was going to say, or the death of the character because they can't let the flaw go.
I
If
prefer
it's
a
that
little
kind
more
of
upbeat
story.
endings to my
I know you do.
stories.
I was kind of being facetious.
So
Um,
I do plot it out. I get that at least the
but the brainstorming is what I'm talking about. Like in creating the plot, I think that's where like for a lot of the time, like the plot and pantser debate shouldn't like. I think it's unnecessarily binary. Like right now, I have the plot for about a 5,000 page or 5,000 word short story. Perfect. I love it. Like I really enjoy. I'm going to enjoy writing it. But so I have the container as you described, right?
Mhm.
But that container is an atypical shape. It's weird. It doesn't, that's but I pantsed my way through creating the outline. I didn't know what she was going to do in the car. I didn't know what she was going to do when she went to the phone booth. I didn't know what she was. So I pantsed every one of those moments. But and in that, like answering the questions and kind of flying by the seat of my pants through those questions, I created a container. Right. I created the lines in which I'll color when I write it. And then that becomes the next pantsing part of it, where it's like, what is the interior going to look like? What's on the wall that surprises me? What little element because I know she has to get from point A to point B, that's the plot. Now I get to
Mhm.
pants like, is there a painting she's familiar with in the wall? Just as it allows, I think, like by constantly like, pantsing up like creating a structure and then pantsing your way through it, it allows you to like continue to be creative and invent things even when the container is made. The container just like holds the ingredients, you're still making it as you go. Does
That's
that make
really fascinating. So you create a plot point and then
enters the house, she has to get to the third floor for the next plot point to happen, right?
okay. And then so
So
you
I
just sit down at what okay, it's time to write the scene where she goes to the third floor.
right,
What interesting thing can happen to her on the way? Then
right.
that's what you sit down with that question in your head and you just start
as
typing.
i'm as I'm working, I'm progressing the character through, and then something will just jump out like I just threw that one out from nowhere. She like maybe she sees a painting on the wall in the house, that the same painting she had in her house as a kid.
Hmm.
Maybe that element doesn't mean anything huge to the story, but it allows me to insert that element in the story, keeps that plot point to plot point trajectory from feeling stale. Like I now just invented a thing on the way to something else. Um, it never feels stale. People talk about plotting like it's boring, but it's like it's because you're plotting in a boring way. It's you're not giving yourself the space to invent it, right? And
That's awesome.
I defy my plot points too sometimes where it's like I can see it in the when I reread things. It's like, oh, she's reluctant to go up the stairs. It's because I'm getting tired of writing from plot point to plot point. You know, I can see the character doing things, and I could see them hitting stale moments, or reacting to a stale feeling because I'm feeling stale. So I think coming up with that like trajectory of a story, like you just have to. I think it's you're constantly recreating the container and then the scene becomes its own container. You know, I liked your example, right? Now the scene is the container. Now the emotional moment within the scene is the container, and you get to play within that, um, constantly inventing. And you can go too far with it, but you as a
Hmm.
writer will get that instinct of like you've done enough work. It's the depth is there. That's where your writing group. That's where writing group Gary comes in to say like, you know, slow it down here. There's too much going on, but it also keeps you from being bored in your moments.
So if you let's troubleshoot. If you get to a point in your manuscript and you are bored or you're stuck for some other reason, what do you do as an author? Like pragmatically, like what are the steps? Do you like push away from your desk and go for a walk? Do you ask a question? Do you
I
roll
mean,
a
in the
pair of
moment, like in a
dice? Like what do you do?
I mean, in a day-to-day basis, like I that's a hard question to answer because I think for at least my understanding of my process, which I think changes more than I give it credit for, because I can reflect on conversations we've had that I might not have answered the same way.
Mhm.
I think it's more of a day-to-day thing. Like I started to do the thing where I will see dead air is terrible media, kids. Um,
Uh,
uh, okay.
listen to the sound of
I
my dog breathing while you think. He's so
here's
loud.
I want to say it without sounding like I just toss it out. Like in the like there's a
Toss out
scene in
what?
the scene like what's not working. Like I think that part of like if I look at something I'm getting there's a scene right now that I've been tried to rewrite yesterday in a story like it's because it's just I'm trying to rewrite what isn't right to begin with. You know, it's
Mm,
sometimes you got to tear the house down because you can't patch the holes anymore. You can't prop the floor. You can't replace the windows. The house is just old and it just that doesn't work. What's the bones itself don't work. And I have this like probably 2000, 1500 word scene that is just the scene itself is flawed. So I just have to, you have to sometimes just toss it out. And I think however, in a practice sense, I get there is just like I've just given myself permission to toss it out. Like, all right, I can rewrite that scene better, save myself the hardship of trying to, you know, polish something that's never going to shine.
hmm. Okay, what's your next step then?
Look at what doesn't work and rewrite it and start like okay. So the scene I'm thinking of is the scene. It's kind of it's sort of backstory. It sort of establishes backstory and relation to relation to the main story, right? Who was this character and why are they here? Um, it's all just it's a lot of navel gazing. Like that's what I didn't like about it. It's a lot of
Hmm.
just like stewing around and seven sentences of backstory when it could be three. It's just it takes a really long time to develop, and the action the character's doing while we're getting this backstory isn't interesting. It's completely it's convoluted is the feeling I got.
Hmm.
So when I decided last night I was walking the dogs thinking about it, um, I thought like I cannot rewrite this thing. I just can't. It's convoluted. Like I have to just take like what are the necessary elements? I need to convey who the character is and what their relationship to the haunted object is. and I just have to do it in a straightforward, more concise way that the reader isn't going to sit there and yeah, it's just yeah,
So
just
you
diagnose like what do I need and what was my mistake in getting there is that's what I do next. Just diagnose that.
okay. So and you also set aside time to actually think about it. Like I'm walking the dog, so let me think about that, you know, that thing that's not working in my book, and then ask what are the necessary elements, and then yeah, diagnose what you're doing wrong in it, and then hopefully fix that, or just give yourself permission to toss it out.
That's been the most liberating thing of late. It's just I have given myself permission to throw things away.
So
And
in
it
my Scrivener document, down at the bottom on the left-hand bar, there's a research folder that just is a default thing. And I'll
right,
put, actually, I don't use it in research. I don't know, somewhere in there, either in the research folder or underneath it, I'll create a whole new folder that just says unused stuff. And that's where I put scenes that I cut. And that helps me cut so that it's not actually deleted. You know, if I do need to check something or revive something, or I try rewriting the scene and it still doesn't work and I want to compare it, or this is worse, let me go back to the original, like it's still there. And so that
right.
gives me a little bit, it gives me um not permission, but it makes me feel better about making a decision. It doesn't feel so final.
Yeah, I keep all that stuff. I don't actually toss it. I will create a new version of the story, a new version, and then I'll delete the scene from the new version, but the old version will still be there. And so if I ever want to go back and look at it, um, but I get pretty decisive. I mean, I think once I've given myself permission to get rid of something, like
Hmm.
we're not getting back together, girl. It's
Yeah.
over. Um, it's just not going to happen.
Same, but I don't know. Just it helps me to move through the process knowing it's still there if I ever really need it. Kind of like
Yeah, you don't.
trying to like declutter and you're like, "Oh, this skirt, I love it. I have so many memories. It doesn't really fit. Do I need to keep
You're
it?
the
Blah blah
girl
blah."
that went back
I'll
and
put
looked
it
at
in the
your yearbook
box
and
and
said, "I
I'll
hope everything ended up okay. I hope everything ended up okay." Like I like that about you. I really want those. I want those orphan scenes to go have nice lives in in other books. I do. I really want them to, but I
I
can't
give
live with
them
them
to my
anymore.
mailing list. Here's a navel gazing scene that was beautifully written, but it really didn't fit in the story. So here you go.
See, there's a place we're different. I cannot like once I delete like once I admit that I don't like something, like I have to just I
Oh,
can't live.
I liked it.
Just
You know,
mm,
if I don't like it, I'm not going to share it, obviously. But I remember doing a final cut through one of my a final pass through a novel that I wrote, and I took out I think three scenes that were just lovely, but they
sure.
didn't
Yeah.
advance the story,
Right.
and that's what I gave away.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
deleted scenes on a DVD.
Right.
If you like the story, you're going to go through and read the deleted scenes, you know?
It's true. I think it's, again, I make the joke about writers group Gary. It's funny, but one of the things that he always says, and I think it's some of the best advice I've ever been given as a writer is he will just say the scene actually begins here.
Mm.
And then you read it and you like I think that's real like for me where I cut most often is
Hmm.
if I'm reading the scene and it's like did the scene start yet? And I can see the cut for I can see the break for the end of the scene
Hmm.
like that's what happened to me. Like I was sitting there, I dropped my kid off at Cub Scouts and I went to the bar down the street for a beer just to, you know, kill an hour. And I was thinking about it and it's like, I don't even know if that scene really begins. It just happens.
Hmm.
It's just it's content. It's not story. So it's you gotta get
Mm.
rid of it. You gotta let it go.
I'm going to type that down. If it's content and not story, it has to go.
And to go back to the book that I just finished, that Flight of Icarus, like what was brilliant about it was the pulp. It was styled itself as a pulp novel, and it did the pulp thing where it was like there was no there wasn't a moment of like navel gazing and the whole thing. The story moved, the character reacted, emoted, things changed. It just kept churning.
Hmm.
And not, you don't have to be writing pulp like to hold that to your standard, right? Like even in like E.M. Forster, Room with a View or those kind of books, like things are always moving. They're just moving in an internal way. And yeah, if it's not its content and it doesn't work,
Hmm.
yeah.
Excellent.
Which is why authors, you know, who write fantasy struggle with like world building because a lot of that world building doesn't move the story forward. You know, you get into that like history of why the spire has a red tip on it, and you're like 10 pages in, and the reader's like, come on, I don't need all that history.
So I want to go back to the beginning of the episode. You said that you were talking about your author life process and how you collected these little notes of things to do, and then you would compile them all on Thursdays or whatever into
That's what I
this,
do.
regular master list for the week or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it sounds kind of like you write in the same way. You're brainstorming, you're collecting these little, like, oh, this could happen, and oh, this could happen. And so you collect these little pieces of paper and then you compile it all into a plan, whether you want to call it a plot or whatever. But you've got this sort of, okay, this is sort of what's going to happen from here to there. And
Yeah.
then you start writing at that point with the caveat of what can be interesting or different from this shape to this shape to this shape.
Right. Right.
Okay.
I keep recreating the container. I keep, and I like that example. I will continue to live in it because like the story has a container that is a container for scenes, which are containers. And then there's movement throughout the scenes, which are containers, the beats within the scenes. And each one of those, I think you need to know what the beats are, but you get to like make it up at the desk. I think it would be really dry to say like to create every, to know down to the, I don't know. I couldn't plot the color of the inside of the house if yeah, that would take the fun away. But that's a discovery piece in the writing of like what that's, what those little details are going to be. What's on the bookshelf? Oh gosh, there's three copies of the same book. What could that mean? Is it a red herring? Like I get to
So
do
do
that. That's
you create, the beats before you sit down,
pretty much, I think. Yeah.
and then you just look around the container while you're there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Find
Which
something entertaining in there.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I love your process. That's so neat.
Thank you.
One time as a case study, I watched a favorite movie and I like wrote down every scene that was happening. And then as an exercise, I took the book I was working on and created similar scenes, like in Scrivener, I made scene cards to parallel, what was happening in this movie that would be similar in my story that I was writing. So they were
Right.
obviously different scenes and different characters and whatever, and different things would happen, but like the vibe check, like, okay, this is a scene where, they're showing this ordinary world, and so in this book, what would her ordinary world look like? Let's do an ordinary scene world here. And I would do that all the way through as kind of a plotting um, technique, and then I wrote it out as that. So um, that was pretty plotted. Like that's the most plotting I've ever done, like down to the scene level. This is what's going to happen in this scene, and then I went through and wrote the book, leaving room for surprise or
Right.
detour or whatever. And sometimes I would cut them out, and sometimes I would rearrange them, and so the end product, of course, is way different. But the planning part of it, yeah, it usually does get a little bit shaggy in there for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm an overwriter and an underwriter. It's kind of weird.
You're talking about your first draft though, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
But then when you get in there to rewrite, it's like, okay, a lot of attention to what's going on the stairs, but I overwrote here, but
Hmm.
then there's a clear need for a moment here. I underwrote that. Like that's what the rewriting process is for, is to like trim up that Shaggy stuff and make it
Hmm.
work. Unless Shaggy's what part of the rhythm. I mean, but how you make it create tone, that's another
Yeah,
story,
that's another story.
another another podcast.
Nice. All right. Well, this was really cool. I
This
love
is
hearing
fun.
about process and yeah. So I like to know character, what their problem is, like internally, like without them knowing, what their flaw is, and what their story is. And then what that like theme, what's the point of the book at the end? Like what's the universal truth that I want the reader to take away? And then I come up with the conflict and the choice that they're going to have to make at the end of the book. And I at least need to know that before I like commit to sitting down to writing a story.
And this is where a closing note, right? We're there.
Hmm.
Closing note. I think one of the values that I threw it out as a resource is Locus Magazine, and I would again reiterate that as a recommendation because it's talking about what you're talking about. Like your story might be the cover might be Regency romance, but the story is about something, a character problem, a character situation, a world problem, like it's
Hmm.
about something.
Hmm.
And I think we lose sight of that because the cover, um, Breaking Bad is not necessarily about a high school science teacher that makes meth to pay for his medical bills. It's about, the overwhelming desire for power and the inability to control that. That's really what that's about. And I think when you like Locus Magazine and really smart review, if you read it, will point those things out. These stories are yes, it's aliens in outer space and it's got this and that, but it's really about this core thing. And I think we lose sight of that because that sounds like a parable or that sounds like a morality tale, but it doesn't have to be. Like,
Right.
yeah, that's going back to your theme idea of like knowing what that theme is. I think the best authors either like have either theme is in here and they're able to like identify place it on the story, or it comes just inherent. They always write about a similar theme, but you have to
Hmm.
know, you have to get there eventually. And if it's a surprise at the end, like this thing I was plotting, it's like, oh, this story is actually about trying to have too much control over time and how that can, ultimately screw you over. Okay. 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 Needing to be, the lack of flexibility leads to, more problems. Okay. I didn't know what the story was about, but here we are. I
Awesome.
love it.
I
I
love
love it.
it. Nice little
I need
bow.
to I need to think about it. I need to engage some of your process. That's why I brought up the locus example. Is like I think being more intentional about theme will rescue some moments in story that get lost.
Yeah,
If you have that organizing principle, then it keeps you moving.
I think so. If you run into a place where you're like, I don't know what to do next, well, what's your theme about? How
Right.
can you represent that in a scene?
Right.
It gives you the next step often.
Right.
Awesome. I love talking about this with you, and I hope
Love
that
it.
it resonated with some of the listeners, like either your style, my style, a little glean from both. I'm definitely going to take from your, following that curiosity, I think is really important. And sometimes I leave that out of
Yeah.
in my quest to get from point A to point B, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Sometimes I forget to like be curious along the way. So
Right. It's easy to do.
nice. Thank you so much for talking with me this week.
Absolutely. See you next
And
time.
yeah, see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye bye.